Hi, this is Michael, and this is my review of the Hario Skerton Plus ceramic burr grinder. Now, I've got three ceramic burr grinders here, just sort of a comparison between these three. I'll be focusing primarily on the Hario though, but here's a Java press. This is the least expensive option that I've got in a ceramic burr grinder. This is a little bit under $30, and this has been working for me. I use it periodically. It has worked pretty well, and it's a pretty basic grinder. My main issue with most burr grinders that I've ever used is that you do get a lot of wobble of the burr when you're trying to grind anything more than a medium fine grind. So a coarse grind particularly, you get very uneven grinding because the conical burr wobbles a lot, and that's the main issue that I have with this one. Now, on the other hand, this is a newer product called the Handground Ceramic Burr Grinder. This is my absolute favorite. This is around $80, and this has 3 bushings in it, which prevents the burr from wobbling around virtually at all. So this is really excellent, and I love this grinder a lot. I've done a review of this as well. You could check it out. This has a very precise grind adjustment, and you can duplicate your grind very easily with this one. Now, the Hario, which is the focus of my review today, this is a 2-part system here. Basically, you have the glass jar which holds your grounds. You have a little silicone rubber bottom that helps prevent it from sliding a little bit, and also just helps protect it from hard counters since this is glass. And they do give you an extra little cap here that you can seal up your freshly ground coffee if you want. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense for me to do that though, because to me the whole point of having a small burr grinder is so that you can grind your beans right away, right before you want to make your coffee, and just ensure that they're as fresh as they could possibly be. Now, they also have a silicone rubber top piece here which fits over the hopper, and that helps prevent the beans from falling out while you're grinding it. So they kind of pop around, and if you don't use this, you might find that your beans are falling out. Now, it does have this handle that you have to unscrew off, and I want to show you how to adjust the conical burr on this. So the way this works is you have a 2-piece burr here, and this is a locking piece right here. This locks your adjustment in place so that it can't move once you've selected what it is. And of course, once you put your handle on there, that stays exactly on the setting that you want. But what if you want to make a coarse grind for a French press? Or maybe you want to make a fine grind for your espresso. Well, then you have to change the position of the burr. And this little gizmo here, this little threaded thing, is going to enable you to move the position of the shaft, which is therefore going to move the position of the burr. So if the burr is close like this, it's going to give you a very, very fine grind, and if it's out like this, it's giving you an exceedingly coarse grind. But notice what happens to the burr when it's out in this further out position here. See this wobble? Well, what happens there is the wobble is what gives you an inconsistent grind. You get big chunks, little chunks, and it's just not a totally consistent grind. Now, that diminishes. The finer the grind that you choose, that wobbling diminishes. But the issue is that there is no bushing at the bottom here. There's a bushing at the top, but not at the bottom, so that allows that shaft to wobble back and forth. So that's the biggest deal here. So anyway, your initial setting here, you want to screw this down just so that the burrs barely touch when you turn it. So you can hear them just barely ticking here, and you just want to get it to the point where you don't want the burrs to be bound to each other, but they should just graze each other slightly. So that's your minimum setting right there. So now what you want to do is you have to systematically go through and spin this around and then do test grinds to see what your exact grind is that you want to achieve. And you don't need to go a full revolution. You may only need to go a quarter of a turn to get a significant difference in the grind. So just keep that in mind, and once you find the grind that you want, then you put in this locking mechanism here, and that locks your grind into place. Now you also want to keep in mind that if you put a little black dot or something on there with a Sharpie, that's going to help you remember the relative position. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm just going to put a little black dot on one of those little areas, and then I've got a point of reference now, and I can say, okay, there's a quarter of a turn, there's a half of a turn. If you want to go from a fine grind to a coarse grind, you know that you just have to turn this, whatever, 2.5 turns or whatever it might be. So there we go. So that's basically how it works. I'm going to put this into a very fine grind mode here and lock it in. And let's put some beans in there. So we just start grinding. Now after you grind a lot of coffee, your ceramic burrs are going to get dirty and clogged with oil. And you can take the burrs apart and you can get a soft toothbrush and you can clean the burrs using a toothbrush. Or you could also just put some rice, some white rice in there, and just run some rice through. I've seen people do that. And you can also get coarse salt and put salt through there. Those are a couple different ways that you can clean your burrs. So I've been grinding there for I don't know how long, not that long, and I only have about a tablespoon of fine ground coffee. So I'll grind a little faster. But I'm not going to do the whole hopper. I just want you to see what the fine grind looks like as far as consistency. So let me dump this out onto a plate and we can check out what our grind is. Now this is a very fine grind. This is really nice. It's almost like a powder. So for an espresso, very fine grind. Now let's crank it up and get a coarse grind and compare the two. So there's my little black dot. I'm going to turn this 1.5 full turns. And let's just see what we end up with. Okay, I think we have enough here to make a comparison. So this is 1.5 turns from where I was at the fine position. And I'm going to call this sort of a medium grind. And it is pretty consistent. I see every once in a while I'll see a kind of a larger chunk in there, but by and large that's not a bad medium grind. Pretty consistent. Okay, so let's crank it out a little bit more and get ourselves a real coarse grind. So I'm going to look at my black dot. I'm going to go another 3/4 of a turn, and that should give us a pretty coarse grind. So every once in a while the beans are going to require a little coaxing to go in. Sometimes they bind together just because they're oily or just because of the position of the beans going into the burr. Alright, so here we go. This is going to be a little coarser still, and that's pretty coarse. Now I do see quite a lot of variability. Alright, so here's our first very fine grind, and you can see that is almost powdery and very consistent. And that's where the Hario is going to shine, and most burr grinders, ceramic burr grinders, are going to do very well on a fine setting. This is getting more towards medium, and now you can see that we've got a little bit of variability, but still it's not it's a pretty nice consistent medium grind. And here we have a coarse grind. And you can see now we definitely have more variability in the chunks, but again, it's not too bad, but it could definitely be better. Now let's compare it to the hand ground, and I just want to show you real quickly here what kind of consistency we can get with the hand ground. And I'm just going to go right to the coarse because I can already assure you that it does a really great job with fine and medium grinds. So let me get some beans in there and we will do a coarse grind on the hand ground. So for the hand ground, I'm going to move this all the way to an 8, which is the coarsest grind. There we have our hand ground coarse grind. So here's the Hario Skerton Plus coarse grind, and here's the hand ground coarse grind. You can see it's much more consistent, and here we see lots of larger rocks. They're not real rocks, but I call them rocks. And here this is much more consistent. So that's what you get when you have the extra bushing at the bottom. It prevents that burr from wobbling. So that's my comparison of the burr grinders that I have here. Didn't do the Java press because that's the basic model, but the Hario Skerton Plus and the hand ground. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.